Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Now the weigh-in for me, it was very interesting because it threw up a couple of little surprises. Not huge, but there was somewhat of a surprise to me at least that Anthony Joshua, he weighed a little bit heavier than people expected, and Alexander Povetkin a little bit lighter than people expected. So Joshua's weight was 246 pounds and Alexander Povetkin 222 pounds. So there's some questions for me that sort of come out of all that, which I want to sort of work through. But first, here's a little highlights package of the actual weigh-in and a couple of questions that I'm raising in this little piece.
For the heavyweight championship of the world.
Okay, I'll start with Alexander Povetkin. As I pointed out in that little highlights package, Alexander Povetkin hasn't been as low as 222 pounds since 2009, so almost a decade. So he's coming in very light for this fight. But it must be noted, his general weight range across his career only spans 11 pounds. So make of it what you will. So 219 is sort of his lowest, and that was earlier in his career, way earlier in his career. And 229, he's weighed 3 or 4 times around that weight. David Price fight, 229 pounds. And I was expecting from some of the footage and whatnot that was coming out of his training camp, just looking at him, he looked leaner, he looked a little bit, cutting a bit of a different figure. And I thought, well, 225, 227, somewhere around there. But in fact, 222. So I think we can take from that Povetkin is looking to be mobile, he's looking to be agile, he's going to want to try take Anthony Joshua deep into this fight. Of course, he'll take the knockout if he can get it, but he knows that one of his best chances in this fight is to be in tip-top condition, have his fitness as good as possible, try drag Joshua into deeper water later in the fight, then try drown him. Obviously, it's easier said than done, but Povetkin, he's looking in pretty good shape. So 229 was his last fight, and when he fought Vladimir Klitschko, I believe he was 225. So, I mean, and obviously this is his lowest weight for almost a decade, 222 pounds. Joshua, meanwhile, 246 pounds. So that's his second lowest weight since 2016. So he was 245 for the Charles Martin fight. But he is 4 pounds heavier than for the Joseph Parker fight earlier this year in March 2018, the end of March there. So what are we to make of this? 246 pounds, 222 pounds for Joshua. Obviously with Anthony Joshua, the weight has been a big concern among fans when he sort of blew out to 254. And when I say blowout, I don't mean he got fat or anything like that, but that was his career heaviest. It was a surprise, 254. And before that, he had been 250 for the Vladimir Klitschko fight in April 2017. And obviously for that fight and also the Carlos Takam fight, there was a lot of concern and questions about, is he too heavy, is he too bulky? Then he came in at 242 pounds for the Joseph Parker fight. And it was sort of widely acknowledged that actually that looked to be a pretty decent weight for Anthony Joshua. He sort of boxed well, he looked comfortable, he looked sharp, but now we have him coming in at 4 pounds heavier. So is this going to actually be a factor in the fight? And I mean both weights. Povetkin, he'll obviously be looking to drag Joshua around the ring, I think, looking to use his speed, agility, try to get in on the inside, try to make Joshua work, probably more than Joshua wants to work. And Joshua, 246 pounds. I just wonder about this, because if we think back to March 2018 when he fought Joseph Parker, like I said, he looked pretty good at the weight. He's now heavier. But one of the things that didn't happen in that Parker fight, Joshua wasn't really pushed. He wasn't really sort of made to work heavily in the rounds. It wasn't that sort of fight. So Joshua was able to sort of canter to a 12-round points decision. He may have wanted the knockout, but ultimately he got the decision. And he didn't look too pushed and pressured in terms of getting into that 12 rounds for the first time. But Povetkin, he's a very different fighter to Joseph Parker. He's probably going to make Joshua work more than Parker did. Povetkin, as we know, he brings a lot of pressure. So 246 against Parker, he wasn't made to work that hard for it in terms of a pace in the fight. But Povetkin, it could be a very different story, and now he's 4 pounds heavier. Is this going to be a bit of a factor? Will 246 prove to be a little bit too much in terms of weight? Is he going to potentially gas out a little bit in the later rounds, if in fact it actually gets that far? The collective wisdom among fans right now for this fight is that Anthony Joshua will get a pretty comfortable win, either by a hard-fought points decision, but most likely people are predicting that he will stop Alexander Povetkin. He'll wear him down, break him down, and batter him, and then stop him somewhere between rounds 5 and 8. That seems to be what a lot of people are picking. I just wonder, in terms of this 246 pounds that Joshua's weighed in at, is that potentially just a touch heavy? Does this give Alexander Povetkin, who's coming in a little bit lighter, maybe just something else to work on and go, okay, he's 246, that's higher than he was last time, I can really do something with this. If I can execute my game plan, if I can make Joshua work, pressure him, try to push him back, try to make him work for all 3 minutes of every round, can I have some success here? And obviously Povetkin, with that lower weight, he'll be looking to potentially have a bit more of a speed advantage. I know that there are some that question, 39, how are his legs going to be? How will he respond? Will his legs still be stronger in those later rounds? And that's a completely valid question. We're certainly going to see. But I think, as we sort of said, Alexander Povetkin obviously has been training the house down, and he needs to, because Joshua's been training the house down as well. One thing that hasn't sort of got a lot of coverage, because a lot of people are thinking that Joshua's going to walk through Povetkin, is, well, what about an upset? And I'm not saying just because of this weight issue that, that means Alexander Povetkin is going to win. But it just makes me think, obviously there are some ingredients there for an upset. Often these losses for these top boxers, they come at a time when you least expect it. Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, there's names galore who lost fights that they really weren't expected to lose, and it sort of came out of the blue. And a lot of people are overlooking Alexander Povetkin. Even Anthony Joshua has said multiple times during this, since the fight was announced, that he's looking past him. He's looking to Wilder. He's looking to Fury. He keeps mentioning those fighters' names, even in his own fight week. I do wonder if an upset, and it wouldn't be a massive shock either, because Alexander Povetkin's been one of the best heavyweights in the past decade, and he can punch. Left hook, right hook, very good punches for Povetkin. And if he can manage to get inside, get some quality work away, and if he can manage to hit Joshua clean, well, you never know what could happen. Obviously, Anthony Joshua needs to use his height, needs to use his reach, needs to try, dominate Povetkin from the outside or mid-range, really control the distance, control Povetkin, and try to batter him, tattoo him with that jab, catch him coming in, make him think twice about coming in. Easier said than done, but Joshua, he's actually defensively quite responsible. and he's underrated defensively, and if he wants to cover up, it's going to be hard for Povetkin to nail him. But I do wonder about the pressure. Obviously, there were a couple of spots in the Parker fight where Joshua didn't look that great going backwards. We know he's been working on it, and Povetkin is a much better pressure fighter than Joseph Parker, and Povetkin is much better on the inside than Joseph Parker. So Povetkin, if he can actually get inside, negate the height and reach disadvantages that he does have, and he can get some clean work away, who knows? And Eddie Hearn, he's obviously, as you would expect, trying to talk up the potential danger that Povetkin poses. And it's a double-edged sword. Obviously, he wants to sell the fight, but also there is some truth in it too. But he told TalkSport, I'm quite worried about this fight. Everybody is looking into the future and a potential wilder fight next year. But on paper, outside of Klitschko and even close to Klitschko, this is the toughest fight of AJ's career. Povetkin is very well schooled. He's a former Olympic gold medalist himself and has just one defeat on his record, to Vladimir Klitschko. He can punch, he's got a great chin, and he's got a great engine. He's technically very sound. He's an accurate puncher, and he's way more and has way more experience than Anthony Joshua. And potentially the experience factor that could be something in Alexander Povetkin's favour in this fight. Obviously a decorated amateur, capped it with an Olympic gold medalist. So he does have a lot of good experience behind him that he can sort of call on in this fight. But ultimately, Anthony Joshua is the favourite for this fight, and for good reason. We can't sort of just, pretend that he's not the favourite. He is. But I think there is a case for Alexander Povetkin that an upset, it could very well happen. One or two stray punches get through, and all of a sudden, Anthony Joshua's in trouble. We've seen him rocked before by Dillian Whyte. Obviously, Vladimir Klitschko put him down, and he can sometimes be vulnerable. But at the same time, he can be devastating, as 20 of his 21 opponents have found out. That prospect of the upset, it's interesting, but whether it can happen, I'm not so sure. I'm certainly leaning towards Joshua, more than leaning. It's sort of a 70-30 for me. It wouldn't shock me if Alexander Povetkin won, and it would turn the division on its head. But in terms of fight night, here is the fight scheduled. So there's 7 fights on the card, and when you actually really look at it, there's 4 fights. There was one that was added late, and there's these 2 floating fights. And we've got Price and Kuzman quite early on in the card. So you don't want to sort of tune in too late, because you might miss that fight. And that's going to be a very good fight. Check out my preview video. There's a couple that I've done on that. What do you make of it all? The weights. 246 pounds for Anthony Joshua. 222 pounds for Alexander Povetkin. Can we read anything into these weights? Will Alexander Povetkin be able to make it work in his favour? Can he force Joshua into deep water, drown him, use his experience, and shock the world, get an upset? Would it really be a shock if Povetkin won? Or are too many people just overlooking him, and actually Anthony Joshua, he can be beaten? What do you make of it? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.